Greetings and welcome, everyone. I'm David Danto, and this is the latest in a series of IMCCA webcasts that we're doing during the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to get information out to the general public and the collaboration industry about what's happening in our space and what we can do and prepare for. And this one's going to be another interesting and different topic that we're putting together. I was speaking to a number of customers. In fact, I did a video of this and a blog of it recently, so some of you may have seen that as well, about what's going on, what is the future of the office going to look like. And while we were having that conversation, it sort of dawned on us that a lot of the things that we took for granted going into this, like hoteling and other things that we've done in the past are just not going to fly anymore. And if you stop and think about it, there are a lot of changes that are going to be made to how we design office spaces, not the least of which is how many of us won't go into the office as often as we used to, because a lot of this working from home works. But in order to kind of discuss this, I brought three experts on with me that I think will have a great perspective on the situation, and I'd like to have each one of them introduce themselves as we go forward. So the first name on my list is Chris. You want to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Good morning, Dave. My name is Christopher Maione, and I am a technology consultant and project manager, primarily working in the corporate interior space.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Chris. John, your turn. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you and your company does?
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. My official title is Sales Director for the Mid-Atlantic for New Era Technology. Our specific office is basically focusing on UC and collaboration to a variety of different verticals, corporates being one of them, farmers, and healthcare. We have 25 offices around the nation, and each one of them are busy from the different pain points that the pandemic is hitting us with.
Okay, terrific, John. Thanks very much for joining us. And finally, Mark Peterson. Mark, you've been on a lot of these webcasts before. Again, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, what you and what Shen does?
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be on this webcast. My name is Mark Peterson. I work for Shen, Milsom & Wilkie. We're a multidisciplinary consulting firm across the world, and I lead the AV practice and involved in corporate and enterprise market particularly. And in our environment with the multidisciplinary, we're affected across the spectrum from IT, security, and AV, as well as acoustics even are a consideration as well.
Terrific. So the three of you, thank you very much for joining me. And I will tell our viewers and everybody else, keep in mind we are in the middle of a pandemic. We think as we're recording this that we're not at the beginning of the end, but we may be at the end of the beginning, which is really good to hear, and we're all hopeful about that. Everybody is still working from home. Everybody's using their home internet connections, so you may see some chop, you may see some cutting out, but again, I think the information and the content is very valuable. So starting in the order that I introduced everybody, have any of you guys heard from clients that you were working with that have said, wait, hold, there's going to be a change because of this. We may do something differently. Chris, anything coming by your way around that?
Several of my clients have expressed concerns that when we go back, things will be different. And speaking to a lot of the employees of those clients, there's hesitation about going back. And we've opened the door to being able to work remote, and that has opened a lot of people's eyes to saying, why do I need to go into the office 5 days a week? So the whole idea of remote working, which maybe started in the world of Google or Yahoo or whoever, is now again being revisited because of this pandemic. And I think we're going to have to take a whole nother second look at remote working.
Yeah, remote working works. All the people that have been saying that it's terrible and it's bad and it's awful, have to admit that as far as knowledge workers are concerned, the economy is still moving in that space because people are able to function. It's, it's my wheelhouse for 20 years, but people are realizing that, this collaboration stuff, it really kind of works. So you're right. I think some people may realize that there really isn't a need for them to lose 2 hours or more a day commuting. John, anything from that you've heard from your customers?
Well, I don't know. Let's say yesterday, the day before that. We do an awful lot of work again in the corporate marketplace, and literally just yesterday they said, no, we're okay with the design. It's pretty much set, but we're going to change the floor plan. We're going to change the spaces instead of some conference rooms, add some huddle spaces or whatever term they're going to use. But we have seen it over the past 3 weeks consistently happening. They're using it as an excuse to hold back for financial reasons. They're using it because they have to, collaborate more amongst themselves to get feedback as to how the epidemic has caused pain. So yeah, one of my responsibilities is being able to forecast a certain amount of sales performance, and I can tell you for the past 4 weeks I was wrong every single time. So the new norm is nothing's fixed. It's moving.
Interesting. All right, so we still haven't settled on that. What about by your way, Mark?
Absolutely. It's hot topic. This is where everyone's focusing right now. Meetings yesterday where our project teams, the enterprise project teams, were talking about staggering the workforce, de-densification. From the construction point of view, they're tracking every single thing product that comes into the workplace, into the construction site, from impacts of schedule, impacts from fabrication, to see what's going to happen at the workplace. We're really looking at this from the now, the middle, and the future. And obviously, we can say goodbye to the salad bar, and at the same time, we're going to say goodbye to the touch screen. And it's going to have a radical impact on how we think about collaboration and how we develop our conferencing rooms. And our clients aren't expecting us to think about this in a couple of weeks or months. They want us to have the answers now. And that's what we're on task to do, is redesign systems on a pivot, on the fly, so they're not putting in old technology tomorrow on these designs that we're putting out right now today.
Now, actually, you just said two things that I really want everybody to talk about, because one of them I was aware of, and one of them, wow, I never even thought of it. So that's why it's good to have these conversations with experts. I lived through densification in financial services. There was a while, Mark, you and I think were at the same company or similar companies, where we went from having offices as vice presidents to having shared offices as vice presidents to we don't care what your title is. If you're not a managing director or an executive director or even executive directors, you're in this long bench. So what used to be 10 floors could be 5 floors, could be 3 floors. Squeeze everybody, pack them like sardines. That is just not going to fly anymore. People are not going to do that. And will we, you used the term de-densification. I mean, I'd never even heard of the term densification until I lived through it. So is that something all of you guys are hearing, this concept of now we're going to de-densify things?
Yeah, going back to the customer conversation just yesterday, they are literally stacking the rooms as the size A, B, C, and that type of thing, and not putting on the floor plan. They're literally going, should we need a conference room? Do we need 2 conference rooms? Do we need any conference rooms? Because we had already laid it out, so we have to be fluid enough to be able to move, delete almost instantaneously. Because we give them the list, give them the specification, tell them what it's all about, and they go, give me 2A, 3 of this, that type of situation. And that conversation changes all the time. I think it's, we're not quite sure that it's changing because of the pandemic. Some of them are just changing because of the financial shape that they're in, and an awful lot of open space, for sure. Town halls are the thing, collaboration areas, that type of thing. And it is getting, the aisles are getting wider in everything that we do.
Chris, you see anything?
Well, we see, the first move going back was everybody was staggering the open office plan. As you mentioned, the trading desk, we were going to populate every other person and stagger it so you were not directly across from an individual. There's a huge financial gain towards densification from the real estate side. So I think before we go back to undoing all that, I think architects are going to come up with some creative ways to perhaps isolate or provide additional protection. Maybe the partitions get higher with glass. Maybe there are ways to control air pressure around cubicles. I don't necessarily know we're just going to go back to, everybody getting 200 square feet of office space.
Well, I think a lot of that. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, I think you're right. That the challenges that we're seeing, and they don't actually, Chris, they don't even get, before you even get up onto the floor. I mean, we've got queuing that's going to happen at the elevator level, right? We've got people that are not going to want to touch a thing from the moment they get into the building. And we need to look at what's happening in China and how they addressed some of these situations with technology and use those as models for how we got to go forward. At the same time, we got to think about the fact that the businesses have no money right now. They are going to be really cautious about how they spend their money. So data analytics is going to be the actual key. And I think if anything we've learned from the pandemic is that factor, is that if we don't have the right modeling, if we don't have the right data, then we're going to be making future mistakes. And so all of our efforts towards technology have to be reinforced with accurate data. Why did we come to these conclusions? Why did we make these recommendations?
Right, but apart from the data and the analytics, people are just going to be squirmish about touching things, right? They're not going to want to do touch screens. They're not going to want to press buttons on elevators. I think we're going to see automated doors, particularly in restrooms, right? Why should you have to touch the door handle at all? The occupancy sensor sees you, the door swings open, you shouldn't have to touch anything. And I also think, are we going to just even go back to handshaking, or do we pick up a culture like bowing, like the Japanese? I don't know. So the technology, but there's also the practical human nature side. I don't see us going back to group hugs anytime soon.
Well, you can see over my shoulder the live long and prosper. I think that that's going to be the new salute for most of the geeks in there. But let's go back to something that you just said and that Mark said before, which I wasn't even thinking about. AV collaboration technology in the office grew up on touch panels. I've had a love-hate relationship with touch panels my entire life. I think they became a huge boondoggle where AV integrators would pay people minimum wage and charge customers $100 an hour for programming, and they became very complicated and much more complicated. The brand names, while they represent high-quality gear, in a lot of CIOs' minds also represent complexity. Get rid of all that XYZ because they don't want it. So some of the manufacturers have started making their own touch panels to simplify all this. But geez, are we going to even have touch panels anymore? I think we've been talking about simplifying starting meetings by using voice control, simplifying meetings by using one's own device, take it out, pair with the room, and use it. I think we might be at an inflection point where, at least in collaboration and AV, we're at the death of the touch panel.
Yeah, I think this will have an influence. I truly do. But that's been the pattern for the past couple of years. Less technology, less touch, different interface, and voice is absolutely going to be part of that. But voice is still a bit of trouble. But yeah, this could force it. I mean, this will force those type of changes. I also agree with what Chris said. I think that we really have to understand the psychology of what's going to happen. Because if I call all my employees and say go to the office tomorrow, probably half of them would show up, and the other half would find a reason not to, because there's going to be fear levels. And we have to take that into consideration in the designs, flat out.
Yeah, John, you bring up a good point. And when I was working with some clients there, their forecasting models of when people are coming back to work, and the reality is that just because we have been sequestered, we've been effectively not been in an environment where we can get contagious. We have not built up any special immunities. So you're going to see this ebb and flow of coming to the work and the risk around work. And in the last couple of days, just coming up to this presentation, I've been researching with Gensler, HOK, Ted Moodis, CBRE, every single organization involved in space planning is right here, right now, looking for answers. In fact, Gensler is actually looking at developing a consulting practice specifically around the workforce remote, right? But I've got to tell you, the most empowering information I found was from Chris Janes, from the CTO from Mersive, right?
He's great.
And that market right now, to me, Dave, and you've been the big advocate about the mobile platform, bringing your own device becomes bring your own meeting, becomes bring your own calendar. It keeps the frictionless from in the room. And I think this is the opportunity that we've been waiting for, to see how this no longer is about just the device becoming a sharing device in the room. This device helps me in a lot of ways. Now I know where I can find space, where I'm going to be able to get to a space that's going to be a little less congested, and all the other information is going to be right here in my hands. And this isn't just about me saying this. This is exactly what's happened in China and how they use the mobile devices to get themselves into a better situation in terms of announcements and awareness for their team. So this is where we need to really focus.
One of the interesting things that we're living through right now, which is very sad, is a lot of the integrators in our space, have furloughed their staff because there isn't any work going on. Not all of them, but a lot have, and there are a lot of people sitting out there. If you are a touch panel programmer in the AV industry, not working right now, the biggest advice that I would give you is learn programming other than the touch panels, because you know what? There's going to be a huge need for things that you can do on your personal devices. Just a couple of examples, and I'm giving these ideas out free because I'm not programming them. Go to town, guys. Couple of examples that we're talking about is I need a broadband usage calculator on my phone. I need to put in what is my bandwidth from home, when I use the speed test app, and then I'm going to put in how many people are working from home on calls, how many kids I have that are watching videos, how many students that are doing distance learning, and figure out what bandwidth that I need and if I'm okay or if I have to kick people off. The room control, the system control, I want to be able to have an application that tells me what I can go in. It recognizes what's going on in the room, pairs with that room system, either Bluetooth or ultrasonic or subsonic or whatever, and gives me those same touch panel controls that I had in the room now on my personal device. There's going to be more and more need for us to be able to just use things that are ours as opposed to use things that are shared. I think for elevators, I don't know what the heck we're going to do. You have most of the modern buildings nowadays going to that single touchscreen system where you put in your floor. We're going to go back to the days of elevator operators or voice control, or I saw one holographic in Asia. Go ahead, Chris, you wanted to say something?
It's called destination dispatch, the elevator button thing. I don't know how we're going to get away from that. I don't know how we're going to get away, as Mark said, from queuing up. I found it very interesting in the supermarkets now. They put arrows so that you can only go down the rows one way. That's a very simple and easy way to keep people from being in contact, making it a one-way versus a two-way lane. I think there's got to be thinking like that as to how people are meeting or congregating. But if you've got 400 traders on a trading floor and it's lunchtime, how do you possibly deal with not having congregation of people together? That's going to be very tough. And we're all, for the most part, we're here from the New York side, but how many people are going to want to have us visit them remotely, right? Are we going to have to consider where our coworkers have been? Where are you coming from? Where did you go on vacation? Where does the cutover between personal life and business safety and security kind of end?
Well, I guess my input on that is just we don't know completely what works best yet. I think that, again, if we tell all of our employees, well, tomorrow go outside and do your normal stuff, it's not going to happen. I think there's got to be a real analysis of, did remote work? And the answer is yes. I've worked for an awful lot of people, and every manager's always been, if I don't see them, I know they're not working. I mean, that approach has changed. I mean, we've had conversations with everybody and said, is remote working for you? So you have to consider maybe they don't have to come back. The supermarket story, we've run into a crisis and somebody put down hours to make it one way. Who knows? That might be a great idea. It might be able to might be moving people through the aisles faster. So it's better services. So there's weird solutions that people are offering. They're like, that could be a good idea. Let's try it. So, but that's going to take a year afterwards to figure it out.
Just take the havoc of Penn Station or Grand Central Station.
Right.
It's a free for all. It's like walking in an open football field any which way you're going. I don't know if you've ever been to Mumbai, but that's what it's like when you land outside of the airport. There are no roads or directions, and I think if we start to have some people control like that, it'll help with the distancing, the social distancing that I think is going to become part of our mainstream going forward.
One other thing.
It doesn't
I'm
stop.
sorry, Mark.
It doesn't just stop at the social distancing. I mean, if we look at some of the things that China did when they were having that situation, they were having drones with loudspeakers, with spray disinfectants, with delivering packages and taking temperatures. They had robots doing touch-free deliveries and self-driving freight. This wasn't like next year. This was happening right on the ground. And I think the concepts around autonomous grocery and self-checkout, you're not even getting out of your car anymore when you're getting your groceries. But the difference there is, and what we actually was kind of interesting, is that you'd think in a society like that it would be forced, top-down, government-driven. It actually was much more of an opt-in model. And I think we're going to see the same thing here in the U.S., is that the the concepts around wanting to be a part of understanding, when I use a QR code, which is one of the things they were doing in China, right? I've come into the building, use a QR code. Green means I can get into the building. Red means I have to go into quarantine. And this was developed by the smaller organizations and smaller communities, not forced upon them. So the opt-in model is going to be there. And that's a fascinating point, because up until now, we've been at the situation of, we'll put Zoom and the risk of Zoom aside, we've been at the situation where the collaboration model, the more we collaborate, the more risk we have to the data, right? So as long as the value proposition is greater than, the risk of the data, people are going to opt in, right? And here's a classic case. If I can give my information, and then by giving you information, I can be more effective or safer or more healthy, I'm in, right? As soon as it becomes big brother over my shoulder, wait a minute, right? So this information and the value of information transition isn't just about health, but also awareness and where I am. So where I traveled before, where I'm traveling to, comes into the equation of, who have I come in contact with, and am I safe to enter in the building? And if we trickle that further down in, the year and two from now, this will come out, where are you collaborating, John? Where is David? Where is everybody? And get to the data, because I know where you are and I know where everyone is, I can triangulate. So I'm hoping that this will become the $2 trillion package that we're seeing is going to hopefully lead to these kinds of innovations.
Yeah,
even though the programmers, David, as you say, may need to be looking for a new job, most of our IT world that supports remote using, internal IT staff, anybody that's working for, the service providers, Spectrum, AT&T, Verizon, their business is booming right now. We're sucking down more bandwidth than ever before. What did they say? It's like Mother's Day every day as far as text messaging and bandwidth goes. So the technology folks are going to be in a boom. And then today we see companies like AMC, the movie theater chain, declaring bankruptcy. Who's going to go back to a crowded movie theater? David, you're a big theater person. You're going to go back to a crowded theater? Tell them Mets fan, they can stagger people every 3 seats. You wouldn't even know it.
That's true. We're concentrating now on what it's going to be like when we all open our doors for the first time in what is hopefully going to be weeks or months, not a much longer time than that, when we don't have a handle on this. Let's elevate the conversation from there. Let's assume and let's pray to God that we come up with effective treatments for this particular virus, and at some point within the next 18 months we come up with a vaccine so that it's not the killer that it has been. Because no matter what we're talking about, nothing's as important as the health care professionals and the tragedy of all the deaths and everything. I haven't lost sight of that, but we're focusing on our industry. Let's think about the time when hopefully that has happened. So we're not so much worried about walking through Penn Station anymore. We're not so much worried about going to the theater anymore. But what will we be worried about in terms of getting sick? One of the examples we talked about when we opened this program was the idea of hoteling. Hoteling means I come into an office the day that I need it, and it may be a different office than I usually work in. I may be in a different office every day. I go in and I ask for my assigned spot, and they assign me a spot, and I sit down. And when I sit down, I've got my arms on a chair. You can't see I'm out of the frame, but I've got my arms on an armrest. I've got my arms resting on a table. There's a keyboard and a display there. There's usually a hard phone there at the desk that in some cases I can program and give it my personality, so it's my phone. Are we in a future, even with the vaccine for this particular virus, are we in a future where people will still be willing to use a shared workspace?
I think with regards to the personal devices, keyboard, mouse, phone, we're not going to share that. I think we'll find ways of putting that in our hand, and I think we're going to see disinfectant protocols where a workspace is not going to be able to be used until it has gone through a regimen of being cleaned. And if that means 3 times a day, it'll be 3 times a day. But I think you'll see room scheduling will now include whether or not that desk has been disinfected in time for you to sit down at it.
Yeah, I keep saying to everybody that we talk, we're in really good shape in the communications industry right now, and it's going to. But I think that the big statement is going to be it's a C-level person coming into the building and going, to his IT staff and to other people, don't ever let this happen to me again, because I think that everybody was caught by surprise. And I think there's going to be some creative solutions to that. Again, the office could be measured, air monitoring or something like that. So it could be, maybe there's a magical technology that can, see how safe a room is and basically report it. There could be a green light, red light, as you were talking about earlier, whether you can enter the building or not, or whether you need to leave the room. I for the past 5 years, I've been trying to get all my technology down to my iPhone. I'm getting close, so I don't need a lot of things. And I think that there's an awful lot there's a generation now that is doing that. The millennials. That's probably one of the things we need to do when we get back is apologize to them, and because they've always been operating like they've been in a pandemic, looking down on their phones, working remotely. In group gatherings where they never touched each other.
Me too.
Right, I'm with you. Where they're sitting in the room, not touching each other, texting each other. They just expand it sometimes by sitting in two different locations. Again, the psychology of this is going to be funny. Again, on the millennial stuff, even on the designs, we're designing it with the millennial in mind now, because you just have to check the temperature of what they're doing. It'll have a major influence going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah,
well,
that's a great mood, Trent.
Good, Mark.
I was on a webinar yesterday with Jeff Friedman, the CEO of Building Intelligence, about this whole GBW, getting back to work economy, right? And so, of course, there's the routine employee screening and checks that are now going to be commonplace, right? This overlap between physical security and human resources and technology, the convergence of those three factors. And of course, we got to be careful of, just like with 9/11, the ripple effect, right? You had a lot of people looking in the back of trunks after the bombing, right? So there's going to be pendulum swing, but I think it's still going to be turnstiles are gone. You're looking at the work days and work time staggered, right? For the first time, everyone else is able to understand working at home and working remotely is effective. So let's change how we formatted our day as long as you're productive. They just need to have more tools on measuring productivity and how do I do that. So reinforcing this model is going to be key. But it's funny, Spectre Group, I'm not sure if you know them, but they are a big player in the space of development. And Mark Spector put out a blog yesterday. Of course, you've got those UV phone sanitations, which is great. Dave, we were at Consumer Electronics. It's a big thing where you could get your mobile device, stick it in something to clean it, right? Now, because now this is the thing. And I got to believe this was a big factor in the spread of the virus in China, right? It was right here because you're going to touch this, right? But Mark was talking about indoor plants that improve air purification, right? So they had a list of different plants that you'd put in your workplace to have it be, have more air. So it doesn't all have to be tech, right? To look at the way we do solve these. Still, though, I still believe that the system that we're looking at is going to rely on how we find people and where we can put them so that they're not overlapping each other, right? And that is right alongside with all the other measurement tools that we'll be putting in place at the same time. And that means that the tools like wireless sharing that we've been, trying to get into the place have to be much more frictionless. I don't want to have to load an app. I want to be able to get and share my content, and I want to be able to do that without having to have a whole lot of different capabilities. So that the use of different platforms, regardless of my, I'm bringing in my experience. I mean, there's absolutely no question that from now on, the experience in the meeting room is what I have in between my own hands because it's the only thing I can control. There's no room PC. There's no keyboards in the room. I have to bring in my experience and it has to be effective. So right now, companies like yours, Dave, with Poly, have to regroup and rethink what does it mean to provide an appliance in a room when the user is really expecting to have their own device and their own experience, and then bring that into the calendaring. Because calendaring is going to drive the whole thing. Where I can find a room, when I can find it, when I can book it, and combine that with my own mobile device. So I'm bringing my calendar with me, and I want the room and the spaces I'm in to recognize my calendar and make it effective.
Well, go ahead, John.
I got to add to, on top of all that, time shifting. You mentioned it, in part of what you just said. It's because whether companies like it or not, with everybody working remotely, they're time shifting. They're walking the dog at maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, or again, salespeople tend to also like work late at night, but that's just going to be a habit. They're going to build their own schedules, and it's important. Where are they? Okay. And it's like, okay, if they're in a green space, who cares? Walking the dog doesn't matter. I need to get information from you. You take the phone call, you give the answer, and you move on for the day.
I think this is pointed out to the entire workforce of knowledge workers that 9 to 5 is finally dead. If I'm a knowledge worker and I have an assignment due in 2 weeks, it shouldn't matter if I do it at 4 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night, or if I'm collaborating with somebody in a different geography. I can't be expected to work 9 to 5. I mean, Europe blew this one completely when they came up with the regulations in some of the countries that you may not answer a work email past a certain time of day. It's like, all right, well, that's only if your work email is coming from people within your region. What if your work email is coming from somebody on the other side of the building? The right answer there is going to be people will work when they need to work, when they're connecting with colleagues wherever they are in the world, or when they're completing individual assignments. We have to bring up a whole new group of managers to understand how to manage remote employees when you're not looking at punching a clock. But that will also affect the office because we won't all have to commute in at 9 in the morning. That'll affect the contact center because if I'm going to be time shifting my hours, I may be wanting to call the contact center at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, and I'll want to reach somebody who can answer me, who's working from home at their remote contact center, who can help me with what I'm trying to do. So I think this concept of 9 to 5 will go away, and I don't think it means we're going to be working longer or harder. I think it means we're going to be working, forgive me for the cliche, smarter, because we will know that right now I can go upstairs and take a walk outside. I don't care that it's the work day because my work's done, or I know I'm going to do my work in a meeting later. And treating everybody like adults is this whole concept of flex time. So John, I think you're completely right with that.
No, the other critical thing is I've been doing this a long time, and one of the first shocks in my system was we're a global company, so exactly that. So we have a very active relationship with our Australia offices, and that's it hurts. The first time we did, I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work. But I've adapted to it. I took a call 3 nights ago from a salesperson at 12:30. Well, they're ready to do a presentation, and they're going to do it the next day. And they had a worrying portion that they were concerned about. I'm worried about this. They called me. I took the phone call. We walked through it. I go, do you know what time it is? She goes, I just have this thing to get done. So there's employees work that way. I got to get this done. You got to be available for me. So we have to be ready for that stuff across the board. Again, I should be able to call a salesperson at 10 o'clock and go, are you ready for tomorrow too? So it's going to be a give and take for sure.
All right, so we've talked. Okay,
I
Chris.
think we're going to see employee shifts. We'll be on a 24-hour, 3-shift workday. The office will only be populated with a third of those people. It will be strategically rotated in such a way so that we don't have to worry about the densification.
Right. So you just said that. It's like, yeah, you're right. How much of a building do I need? It has a direct impact on how much space, how tall is the building. It's baseline stuff too.
I wanted to bring up a different point though, because what I've been inundated in the last 3 weeks, and you sure have as well, is webinar after webinar. Every manufacturer has been looking at how to get their information. And what I thought is fascinating, and Dave, you may have thought of this as well, is that here was virtual reality's opportunity to shine, right? We've been talking VR for years, and yet when it comes down to it, they're not showing up to the party, right? Every webinar that's coming out, that isn't the way we're doing it. So the ingest, it's fascinating because now we've got all these people trying to do this content. The trade shows are out the window, right? So, we got work to think about in the workplace, but we also have the consumption and where that information's happening. And so the creative processes now to come into place to create virtual tours and virtual experiences are mixing right in with our daily work. And that's not going to go away. Should be continuing to be a key factor in how we consume. And we're learning that the consumption of that information needs to be in different kinds of pockets. Some information I can consume from a webinar. Some information I need to talk to subject matter experts. And for the first time, I'm recognizing I can go right to the factory floor. I should be able to take a virtual tour of the factory floor. I did this just a couple days ago with a systems integrator. Instead of going to their site to see how they fabricated the racks, I was brought around with a mobile device and I saw everything I needed to do, thank you very much, so I didn't have to travel those places. So these tools and being creative about how information is coming in and how it's being consumed is fascinating because it's going to live a long time. The other factor I think that's key is building information management. The BIM system, everything we're talking about this building systems is the first question coming from every meeting I'm in is, what do you do in the space of knowledge and awareness of what's happening in the building, right? Because ventilation systems are going to be key, and how they work with the control systems are key. And up until now, it's been a little fiefdom. You know, you got your different companies providing their own little services, and everyone says the schedule is too fast to really take a step back and really develop a right kind of ecosystem that takes care of all of the different factors and centralizes the services. That's now going to be a new equation. I hope we'll get a chance to talk about that early on in these projects.
Okay. All right, so let's take a tiny bit of a curve here as we come to, nearing the end of our conversation. We've talked about time shifting. We've talked about technology. We've talked about the change in the office. We've talked about disinfectant patrols and disinfectant team and sanitizing chairs. We've talked about personal devices. So we're going to get a kind of handle on where these changes are going. What we really haven't talked about is business continuity. Business continuity was a very important thing, certainly after 9/11. We shifted, most corporate strategies shifted from let's get everybody onto a single campus to let's get everybody dispersed onto different campuses geographically. There are organizations that set up, emergency trading floors and remote offices that people could come to should they need to if they ever lost their headquarters again. We had some companies moving to the cloud, so that there would be some remote capability, whether you have to connect into your company's own on-prem infrastructure using, a VPN, or whether you're going directly to a cloud service. But what we never did until we were forced to with this pandemic is, what I like calling the flush test. We never sent everybody home and told them to flush their toilets at the same time to see if the system could take it. Do we think business continuity strategies going forward are now going to include, 1 day a year or 2 days a year when everybody has to work from home and be on a town hall all at the same time to see if their internet is working and make sure that their kids and their spouses are, or that they're simulating that as well? Because, it's a snowball. It's going to be rolling down the hill. If I am forcing my employees to have work from home capabilities, am I telling them they have to have a big enough broadband to handle themselves and their whole family? And if I'm doing that, am I paying for it, or am I reimbursing for it? And if I'm doing that, am I building a chair in the office for them to go to? Or because if I'm already reimbursing it, am I telling them just, work from home? How do you think we're going to react from a business continuity standpoint going forward? Because, John, as you pointed out, this caught everybody off guard.
Yeah. Well, my hope is it's basically a pressing issue that everybody wants to buy because we have an entire division that takes care of that.
Did you hear one of the architectural firms is getting into the space now? There's a new space and they're going to be experts in it. I mean, right. Lord, for those of you guys who've worked with that architect, you know what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Sean.
And that's the thing is some of the stuff is we're saying, business continuity is like, well, they were the first one it was called when it was called off. When everyone was told to go home, that group got really busy. So the answer to that is yes. And I just think that we get lazy about this stuff. We really do. I think Chris mentioned earlier, it's like we're going to have, the pains and the concerns that everybody has are going to stay with us for 6 months, then it's going to drift off. So business continuity is probably going to be a concern for the next 18 months, and then everybody's going to be, we're good. We're going to be good enough. I think it's interesting what you're saying is it's going to create better designs and better work-throughs with our clients because we have some additional questions we can ask. And we could get some feedback and what their concerns are. And our responsibility is to ask those questions so that they don't run into, I didn't know, I wasn't prepared for that. That's where our responsibility is. And the consultants are in a good position to do that. I'm sure that Mark and Chris already do that.
Chris, are you finding that business continuity is creeping back up into the conversations even this early?
Yes, because everything was kind of caught off guard. When we go back, there are going to be new rules and new practices on business continuity. I think for the most part, we've gotten good practice because we've been forced to practice. But now people are going to go back and go, when that happens again, because it will happen again for some reason, pandemic or other, we will be able to more quickly remote back to our home workplaces, et cetera, and do it better. Right now, it's been a scramble, and even companies like Zoom have been scrambling, trying to keep up with, their business continuity and the hackers and everything that's going on. I think corporate America is going to look at this and say, okay, when we have to do that next, let's make sure our people are prepared. Let's have practice. Let's have home office standards. Let's have bandwidth requirements. Let's have proper seating, proper lighting, proper audio in the home workplace so that when the next pandemic or other comes, we'll be more prepared for it. And
Chris,
I think this has been a big boost for business continuity.
yeah,
Yes.
and Chris, you've got. I just want to remind you that if you guys look online, I blogged that this was going to happen, specifically that a pandemic would force everybody to work from home in 2014. And I told people, look, get your act together now because there isn't going to be time to do it when you need to. Make sure you're prepared. Now, it didn't take a crystal ball to realize that a pandemic or a breach or something else was coming. And organizations, some were more prepared than others to get their workers going from home. Others are now going to be prepared going forward if they survive. So it's interesting. What about from your perspective, Mark?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Dave, I don't see the crystal ball in the background. It's doing all the forecasting that you had. But this looks like the hierarchy of needs. And actually, I was quite fascinated being on calls, and of course, a small company, that I thought that the biggest problem would be the bandwidth, right, and in having chunked bandwidth. But everyone was working remotely really, really well. So some of the fundamental core requirements we're actually seeing the Verizons and the Spectrum and all of the carriers, the broadband carriers, actually carrying through pretty well. Frankly, I think they need a big, at least in where I've been, they need a big shout out because it hasn't been as much of a disaster as expected. Many of our enterprises do business contingency planning already, and they do cycles of that, but they can't really stress test the full experience of what it means to be remote. And yet, as Chris was talking about, when we start talking about the quality of of experience from the home user and what home standards are, that to me recognizes we're further up the pinnacle. That it isn't so much about core access. It's further into the conversation about how to make it. Well, we've got that one. Now, how do we make it actually work? And what tools do we use that are effective? And some of these tools aren't about real-time collaboration, as we know, right? It's the persistence of the information between the sessions and staying in touch with our peers virtually. So how do I know when you're not talking? And if we see this quite a bit, David, right? That the measure of value of the experience isn't necessarily about the technology. It's about how effective you as the user understand how to use the tool, right? How to reach in and see and talk to people that aren't actually actively speaking, knowing they're there and reaching in and making sure they're engaged in the conversation. And we have to be careful that the people that are using the technology aren't misinterpreting its performance or its skills just because they have a lack of training on how to facilitate meetings in a new style.
100%, and that's probably where a lot of the security panic has been coming out with all the FUD coming from other manufacturers. It's as I said in a webcast very recently, if you buy a new car but don't read and figure out how to lock the doors and somebody breaks in, that's not the manufacturer's fault, that's on you. We have to, if we're going to use these tools, we have to be taught how to use these tools correctly so that we use them safely and get what we want out of them. So that's all great news, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Let me go around to everybody and ask how folks can reach out to you and get in touch with you. So, Mark, why don't we start with you since I'm looking at you right now? How would somebody get in touch with you?
So M. Peterson at smwllc.com. Shen Milson Mwilke is probably the best way.
Terrific. Thanks very much. John, what about you? How would somebody reach out to you?
Well, just one of the cogs of the 25 offices of New Era Technology. So our website is chock full of information about all the services that we provide. It's neweratech.com. You can find me in my mad ranting sometimes on Twitter at jgreen6. And other than that, I'm on all the social media channels. And I'm also seem to be joining a lot of these virtual happy hours. The one that you held the other day, David, was remarkable. So you'll see me there as well.
Yeah, no, mine are virtual lunches. I don't get into the virtual happy hours because I think I've actually been invited to 3 of them later this afternoon, and it's just too hard to pick. I'll probably go in bed and cover myself up, with the blankets and think about better times. Chris, how would somebody reach out to you and say hello to you?
C. Maione at chrismaione.com. And I'd like to just, throw one thing out there. While I don't expect or hope that there ever be another pandemic such as this, it scares the heck out of me to think we would have something like this and not have bandwidth or power at the same time, because then we would be proverbially screwed.
Yes.
I agree. I did have the generator in the house, so it's standing by just in case. And I went into my garage yesterday, and I have like 5 or 6 cans of propane. So I think I'm in good shape for power going out, but that's just for a short period of time. Thank you. And as you pointed out, I'll agree with you. The telcos are now utilities. Internet bandwidth at home should be considered a utility. We have to not make it a privilege anymore. It's got to get everywhere. Power is a utility. We're in that era as well. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me for this webcast. We're going to be doing more and more of these as we go forward. If you're looking for any information on the IMCCA, just go to imcca.org and click on the resources tab. You can pull down all of our pandemic support information, webcasts like this, manufacturers talking about what they're doing, resources that are available, training, education. Anybody wants to reach me, David Danto, just Google me online and hit one of the 300 or 400 emails. For the IMCCA and for my guests, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.